Good evening and welcome to Legacy After the Locker Room. I'm your host, Kayla Bradham, getting ready to join Paralympic swimmer Jonathan Heider momentarily. Folks, Jonathan's story is one that you're absolutely not going to want to miss. And I'm just going to take a second, read his profile, his bio. Born during the Croatian Civil War of Independence in 1991 to 1995, Jonathan was placed in an orphanage at birth from his biological family. Knowing of his soon-to-be adoptive parents, a nun on a mission found him and immediately reached out to them, stating that she found a little boy with no arms and no legs and asked if they wanted him. Sight unseen, they said yes without hesitation. Fast forward, as a high-energy kid in small-town Wisconsin, Jonathan soon plunged into the world of athletics, quickly grasping the sport of swimming. Starting off locally, swimming quickly took him to the national stage as well as the international stage, where he competed in junior nationals, junior worlds, Pan American Games, Canadian Open, Greek Open, and many others. Folks, welcome to Legacy After the Locker Room, Paralympian swimmer Jonathan Heider. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. It's great.
You bet. Jonathan, tell us, I just read the first two paragraphs of your bio. Tell us a little bit about how you got started, what your story as a little boy looked like, and how that kind of moved into Paralympics.
Yeah, so kind of as my bio says, I was a high energy kid, and my parents already had three older siblings or older kids of theirs. And so joining in the family, they all had sports, whether it was figure skating or hockey or soccer, and they were doing everything. And wanting to be like my older siblings, I got into sports as well and really wanted to be part of that kind of community too, the one that they had. And excited me being ringside for my brother's hockey games, and I wanted that same experience myself. And so I tried a variety of different sports. Growing up in Green Bay, there wasn't many disabled organizations for sports. And so we would drive all the way down to the Chicago suburbs and be part of the Great Lakes Adaptive Sports Association's programs every Saturday. And so getting up every morning at 5 a.m. and driving down to Illinois and spending the day doing wheelchair hockey, wheelchair basketball, wheelchair softball, sitting volleyball, and swimming all throughout the entire day. And just being able to be with that community of people, I think, was so important for me to find peers who are also in disabled sports. And so trying a variety of different sports was really fun, but eventually the sport of swimming is what really took off for me. And being able to take that and utilize it and turn it into what it was. And so I just felt so free with swimming. And with the sport of swimming, compared to all the other kind of disabled adaptive sports, is there's no equipment. It's just your swim cap and your goggles and your swimsuit. And compared to a lot of the other sports, we have to have, specialized wheelchairs, a specialized equipment for this, specialized equipment for that, bats and gloves and sticks and all that stuff. With swimming, it was nothing. And so it was just this sense of freedom for me. And it was so powerful having this sense of freedom in the water where I could just be my own body and be able to compete as an athlete and kind of be on this playing field as a swimmer. And I think it was just such a powerful feeling, and why I think it took off the way that it did, that I could have this newfound freedom that I never, had before, ever existed in the past. So yeah, it was
so
great.
Jonathan, clearly you were good. Clearly you were good. How did you end up, at the Olympic Training Center, the Paralympic Training Center? Did you leave your family? What was that experience like, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, so I was at a swim meet in Texas, the Can American Games, Canadian American Games, and it took place down in San Antonio, Texas, and I was competing there. And the head coach, Jimmy Flowers, who has passed in recent years, he was the head coach for the resident team of the Paralympic swimming, and he watched me swim, and he's like, "I really love your technique. You have so much potential. You have so much abilities. I want to coach you myself. I want to take you to that next level." I would love for you to go online and apply. And at this time, I was only 14 years old when he said this to me. And so I thought that was so powerful for him. Out of all of the hundreds of athletes that were there in San Antonio for this competition, that he came up to me and said, "I see your potential. I want to reach that." And so I think that was such a great awakening moment to have that opportunity. And so I went online and I submitted the application. Actually was denied the first time I applied, but then I got approved the second time I was applied. And so I was 16 at the time when I got accepted into the training center. And so I was in my sophomore into junior year of high school. And so I ended up finishing my high school online through the Wisconsin Academy of Public Schools. I can't remember the exact. And finished my high school online while I traveled all over the world. And so I had the opportunity at 17 years old is when I moved out to the Olympic and Paralympic Training Center. And so I, was a very young, very, naive kind of teenager. And so you go from, living at home where everything's kind of taken care of to moving somewhere where they say, hey, we have a swim competition in Ganatu, Canada from this date to this day. You need to be there by this day. You need to be back here by this day. Make sure you have all your transportation taken care of. And so it was this huge adjustment of literally being thrown into adulthood, at 17 years old. And I'm completely humbled and grateful for my parents allowing me at 17 years old to, go have this life and this opportunity to, train amongst the greats and be in a place, surrounded by some of the greatest athletes of all time, and just be amongst these really incredible people who inspired me to continue to be not only a athlete, but overall around good person. I think through the Paralympics, and the Olympics, they really emphasize, representation and representing your team, representing your country, and really being dignified and really being, the proud example for the rest of the world. And it was such a great opportunity to have that experience, to gain that, that respect, and to be able to share that with the rest of the world. And I know with, your business with Sports Philanthropy Network, it's all about, the ethics and morals of being an athlete. And that's something I hold dearly, that I think the Olympic and Paralympic Training Center definitely put in me on how to really give back to the community and be there for other athletes and the coaches and mentor people who want to be in the athletic world, whether they want to be athletes, whether they want to be coaches, whether they even want to be in like the medical staff. You don't even have to be an athlete to be, successful and be able to give back in the athletic world. And I think it's so powerful what I learned and experienced through the Olympic and Paralympic Training Center that has gotten me to where I am today.
Well, first of all, shameless plug, seeing that you mentioned the word, being inclusive and representing well. Let's just real quick shout out. We both live in Milwaukee. We are committed to closing out this podcast at 8 p.m. Central Time this night for kickoff. Bucks and 6, right?
Bucks and 6.
That's right. But on a serious note, Jonathan, everybody's eyes are on Tokyo. Everybody's eyes are on shikari and marijuana and COVID, and there's just so much going on with this Olympics. Representing, your social justice standpoint and views and different things like that. What would your advice be to athletes who are participating in the Olympic or the Paralympic Games, this go around?
I think it's still continue to get out there. I mean, you earned the spot, you deserve this spot. You're making heads turn. I think one thing that's fantastic is one of the big controversies that's going on right now is kind of in the swimming world is relating to swim caps and how certain swim caps for African American hairstyles. And, it's finally got people's heads turning like, we should actually allow those in the Olympics and Paralympics. And I think it's this, yes, this Olympics and Paralympics this year are not the big grandiose games that we all come to expect and know. But like this is kind of like last year with everything with Black Lives Matter and all of these different and organizations that were going on, is now through these Olympics and Paralympics, it's time to like really get our message and unify as a country, unify as a world, be inclusive, and show people of different backgrounds. And it's fascinating to see so many wonderful, talented athletes represented from all different countries with all different backgrounds in in races and religions and genders and sexual orientations and all of that. And I think right now, I think this year the focus is so on the spotlight of that change for the better. Going back to the 2008 Paralympic and Olympic Games, their motto was "One World, One Dream," and I think yes, that was true then, but I think that's even more true now. Coming together as one world. We did it last year. We did it. There were protests for Black Lives Matters and, gay rights and all of this stuff last year, across the world, marching in streets of, London and all over Asia and all over the world. And I think it's fascinating that, I think keep up that with these Tokyo Games. I know that was one thing that was put into my head through the Olympics and Paralympics, was to put politics aside. That was one thing that was definitely drilled into our head. And like to an extent I understand that, because we just want to come together as a world, as athletes. But it's hard to set the politics aside when it comes to issues. You brought up Shikari, some of these wonderful athletes, and it sucks that politics got in the way of that, and some other things, like I said, like the swim caps for African American hairstyles. It's disappointing, but change is happening. I mean, a lot has changed for inclusivity and diversity in the Olympic and Paralympic field since I was part of all of that from 2008 to 2012. We've made a lot of progress so far, and I think that's one thing I want to touch on is remember the progress we have made. That is huge. I know a lot of people want to focus on the negatives of everything that they're mad at right now, but look at what we've accomplished so far. I mean, the fact that, so many things that the Paralympics, which the name of the Paralympics is parallel to the Olympics. That's where they get their name from. And now I think we're finally coming closer as a country to giving them that parallel inclusive recognition. I think when the U.S. tennis announced their roster for the Olympics and Paralympics, they did it in one post with all the Olympians and Paralympians together in one marketing strategy. And I think that's fantastic. And so looking how far we've come to make that possible is beautiful in and of itself.
I completely agree with you. And I'm truthfully very ashamed to say when I saw the swim cap issue, I actually went to my 20-year-old daughter, and I thought I was just old. And, like sometimes these racist dark memes go over my head. And I said, I just don't think this is a very funny joke. And she said, Mom, it's not a joke. And I said, it's 2021. What do you mean this isn't a joke? And she said, Mom, it's not a joke. And I think, Jonathan, that's heartbreaking. How did it get to 2021 and we're having issues about swim caps?
Right.
We've got to do better than this, and we have to unite. And so, interestingly, and just kind of switching gears a little bit, you actually started doing some speaking and saw some things that could be improved upon when you were with the Olympic Committee, and started doing speaking, working with inclusive spaces, things like that. Tell us a little bit about that, Jonathan.
Yeah, so beyond just training as an athlete at the Olympic and Paralympic Training Center, they also put us in the atmosphere of going out to the community and talking to the community about being more inclusive with disabilities in sports. And that's where I first kind of got my real taste of it. And that's what, really got me empowered to make these kind of changes. And it's just, I saw that, and it was kind of my aha moment where I'm just like, yes, this is what I need to do. And so doing that through the Paralympics when I was living at the Olympic and Paralympic Training Center carried on to me signing with a public speaking agency out of Minnesota in 2014, where I wanted to continue to do that mission. And I did that through them. And then as of this last year, I separated myself from them and wanted to take this in a whole different direction, opening my own public speaking and diversity inclusion workshop business, just so I could reach a further audience to really expand on the concept of how can we be more diverse? How can we be more inclusive? And so taking my experience and knowledge from the Paralympics, and then also on the side of that, getting my degrees in architecture and real estate, I wanted to focus on accessibility. This year we marked 31 years since the ADA Act was signed. That's powerful. I mean, 31 years ago, we decided, let's make this country more accessible. And that's fantastic. And using my accessibility knowledge through architecture, and again, as the Paralympic knowledge, I want to expand and try to reach untapped markets that were never touched before, reaching out to people who felt excluded in the past, those who felt like their voice wasn't heard, those who felt like, well, wait a minute, I need somebody to talk to me. Well, I'm here to talk to you. Let's do this. Find those voices and be those voices for those who don't have a voice. And so that's been my life's work. At least started, like I said, in 2008, 2010, and has definitely fueled the fire now, especially with everything that's going on now. We are definitely an incredible time for, diversity, equity, inclusion, and it's so powerful right now, and I'm so excited to be part of all of that.
And, first of all, I want to say thank you so much. Talking about Sports Philanthropy Network Legacy After the Locker Room is powered by SPN. You were a guest on the DEI panel for Sports Philanthropy Network. Were you on two panels, Jonathan, or one?
I was on 3 panels.
Three.
So
Tell me which panels you were on.
Yes, so I was on the panel for adaptive sports. I was on the panel for disabilities, and I was panel for LGBT in athletics and sports.
Awesome. Okay, so DEI. To a lot of people, that's a new topic. It's become a buzzword. I'm not sure if we think it's overused or not, or if people really know what it means. But every professional team now has a DEI inclusion officer. Tell our listeners a little bit about DEI, why we need it, how it came about, and your expertise in the space.
So DE&I stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. In summary, it's again trying to reach that untapped market. It's trying to find inclusive techniques in the workplace, in the educational setting, in any environment to find ways to have equal access for everyone. Is really kind of the fine point of it in simple terms. And so, yes, a lot of places, like you had mentioned, athletic teams are hiring DE&I managers. HR departments for big businesses are hiring directors of DE&I to handle, their own business, to find, these untapped markets and to really find inclusive ways and strategies to do so. And so that's kind of in a nutshell of what it is. I think it started a couple of years ago where we really saw ways that, well, wait a minute, how can we do this a little bit better? And I think it's been fantastic that now companies are setting aside money to get training done at their businesses, to find these kind of DE&I strategies to implement into their businesses. And I think it's just kind of fascinating because how it took off and where we are now. And just like I said, it's finding that equal access. How can everybody be able to be in this environment? And I think one thing that has really flipped its head was this whole pandemic and finding, before this pandemic, it was, this is the way things have always been. This is the way things will always be. And this pandemic has flipped that right on its head and allowed for this out-of-the-box innovative thinking. And because of that out-of-the-box innovative thinking, we've then approached the whole D&I world a little bit different and understanding, oh, wait a minute, we don't have to do things the way that they were always doing. Now we can find inclusive techniques on how to introduce people into this business and find ways for them to do things. I was talking to someone who's blind, visually impaired, and they're in the architectural realm as well, and they get their architectural plans printed in Braille. Like, that's fantastic. And for myself, I wouldn't have been able to, I don't want to say the woulda, coulda, shoulda, but I wouldn't have been able to be successful in the architecture realm 20 years ago with drafting boards and drafting tables, and doing everything by hand. But now I'm actually an asset because I have the background and knowledge of accessibility and, the ADA and how to implement that in ANSI 117, which talks all about code regarding accessibility and to really reach a new standard. And I think that right there is the new concept of DE&I, is meeting that new standard. There shouldn't just be, a ramp on the side of the building behind the dumpsters. We should all have equal access into that building, and finding strategies to really implement and meet that new standard. There is a new standard of living. There's a new standard of office work, and let's reach it. Let's aim for the stars and set that standard so high that the rest of the world looks at us and says, wow, they are so inclusive as a country and as a business and as a sports industry. Look what they've done. And I think that's where we're at right now, and it's a very exciting time.
Oh my gosh, you just like make my heart skip when you say that, because I have a vision, Jonathan. So you graduated from UW Milwaukee with high honors in architecture. You do real estate. I'm curious, what is the one thing that drives you nuts with buildings, and have you found any like just off the wall crazy solutions that it's just like duh?
So, one example that I always bring up, and it frustrates me, and even the ANSI 117.1 that I mentioned previously talks about it, but people will always put garbage cans in front of the elevator buttons in a lobby. That absolutely drives me nuts. Like for people in wheelchairs, they have to try to reach around or above the dumpsters, or the trash can, I should say, to get to the elevator button. People with visual impairments who use canes, they can't find the elevator button because they just see it, they just run into the trash can. And so that is one of the things that has frustrated me the most. And I remember when I was working at the first architecture firm that I was at, I saw this, and we were designing a space. And I said to my project manager, I'm like, hey, this is going to be a problem. I know they haven't, we're still in the designing phase, but I know that if we keep things going the way that this is, they're going to put the dumpsters in front, or the trash cans in front of the elevator buttons. And so what I did is I worked with her, and we decided to carve out a little niche in the mechanical room next door where the boilers are, and just create this little niche that's 2 feet by 2 feet that they can easily put the trash cans in. And when we went and did a walkthrough, we pointed it out to them and say trash cans can go here, not in front of the elevator doors. And, it's one thing that still drives me nuts. And when I go into a new building that I've never been into before, and I see the trash cans in front of them, I literally pick them up and move them and put them in an entirely different spot. That's one thing that still somehow drives me nuts when it comes to accessibility in architecture. Like, why do we do? I get it, it makes sense, but it doesn't make sense for everybody else. And going back to that concept of equal access, everybody should have equal access to those elevator buttons.
Thank you for being an advocate. Real men pick up garbage cans and move them. So Jonathan, switching gears just a little bit more. I'm not sure that even still in our society, we don't have problems. I can remember being a little kid, and I'm 48 years old, and I was taught, don't stare, right? And then somewhere along the line, when I was a young mom, there was this sort of thing of, don't stare, but go say hi. And if you have a question, ask. Where are we at now? What's the right answer? How should we train our kids? And how do we just kind of go, further with the D, E, and I space?
So I think everything is very up to the person. I speak solely on my own perspective and my own background, and my opinions are my own. And so I personally believe that I'm open to people coming up and asking questions. I would rather ask than assume. And so I think it's important to also educate beyond just seeing a person who's different than you. Is also, as a parent, educating children at home. Read, there's so many incredible books about, different races and different religions and disabled people and different sexual orientations, that there are so many wonderful kids books that parents can just read to them in bed, that talk about people with different backgrounds. And I think beyond just, allowing them to go up to ask questions, is when they read these books and they see these people on TV and they see them, then they get familiarized. And so they wouldn't stare at that point, because they're like, oh yeah, that's just like little Timmy that you read in the book last night to me at bedtime. And so familiarize your kids and, the other kids around you, with, education on people of different backgrounds, regardless of what type of background, as I just previously said. Just allowing that education to happen at home too, rather than out on the streets when they see someone like myself.
Yeah, that's great. There's actually a comment on the Facebook Live right now that says, not only to be in this environment, but to thrive in this environment. And Jonathan, you're
Yes.
really paving the way for that. So thank you, Deborah Miller, for that comment, because Jonathan is one of the most amazing examples of thriving that I've seen. Completely whole, completely complete, and just using your gifts, your talents, your skills, and your abilities to make the world a better place. I think that's what it's all about, Jonathan. We are just about out of time, but I want to give you a few minutes to kind of give your words of wisdom. What is it that you would say? The mic is yours. What is it that you would tell the world?
Just keep your mind open and educate yourself. There are so many incredible resources for different backgrounds and diversity. If you want to learn about diversity in one way or another, there are so many books, there are so many websites, there are so many incredible people, there are so many local resources of programs that exist in your community. I know I live in a bigger city of Milwaukee, but even some of the smaller cities have, resources available at their community center or their library, for people of different backgrounds to come together and have, a jam session one night, or just a session. And so find those communities that you feel that you are part of, and educate yourself, and never stop learning, never stop growing. And that's, even myself working as a professional public speaker and diversity inclusion workshop leader, I don't know everything. I keep educating myself each and every day on new techniques and new stuff that I've never heard about. And I'm like, wow, that's fascinating. And so I love that opportunity myself to be able to, educate myself. And I hope that people do the same and want them to do the same.
Great message. Great message. And it's a message for every single human being on earth. Keep growing, keep learning, keep contributing to your community. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for that message. Speaking of contributions, Jonathan, I ask every guest on Legacy After the Locker Room to partner with me to support my charity of choice, Special Olympics. I know you were all over the world swimming as a Paralympian. Jonathan, would you consider signing an autograph donation to Special Olympics to partner with Legacy After the Locker Room?
Yes, absolutely. Definitely.
Thank you. I know that will really bless some kids, because I'm sure there's a lot of kids looking up to you and thinking like, wow, I can. Jonathan Heider resonates with me. Jonathan Heider did great things. I'm going to do great things. Jonathan Heider is doing great things. So am I. Jonathan, we have about a minute left. I want to give you a chance to shout out any sponsors or any businesses or friends that you need to shout out, and thank the people that you need to thank.
Yeah. So, shouting out to people, obviously, shout out to family who have gotten me here, from humble beginnings of an orphanage, for, my parents saying yes, sight unseen, to making this happen. And other family members who have always been there for me. Shout out to Jimmy Flowers for finding my talents and finding my potential and getting me to the world stage. Shout out to Glenn O'Sullivan and the rest of the Great Lakes Adaptive Sports Program, for, giving me my start. And then also just, I wanted to, give out my business there. Split Star Productions is my business. Just split-star.com is my website to check out and reach out if you want to. All my contact information is on my website. Don't be afraid to reach out. I'm always open to questions, ideas. If you want me to speak or run one of your workshops, I'm more than welcome to do so.
And Jonathan, just to verify, you are on the public speaking circuit, the motivational speaking circuit.
Absolutely, yes.
An expert in the DEI space, available for workshops and programming for businesses, schools, and clubs.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, my specialty and my background is accessibility in architecture, professional sports, athletics, as well as LGBTQIA, and then disabilities. I am sensitivity certified in both LGBTQ as well as disabilities.
The total package, ladies and gentlemen, the total package. Jonathan, thank you so much. I know it's time for tip off, so we are going to say this. My name is Kayla Bradham. I'm here with Jonathan Heider, and the two of us are reminding you to live your legacy in Bucks and Six.
Bucks and Six.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.